everybody, and we are live. It is Wednesday, it is April the 10th, and it is The View from the Top. I am your host, Brian Friedman. Hi to Ray Abbott out there. People are coming in from all over the world. We already have, oh wow, we've got over 130 people live today, and we've got a great show for you today. We're going to be talking about mobility management in a perma-crisis world, and it's just one crisis after another. We're talking political instability, we're talking about natural disaster, we're talking about climate change, we're talking about accidents, we're talking about everything that can happen in the world in which we live and how we handle emergency situations. I'm super excited. Our special guests are Ricus Groenewald and Nidia Knight from International SOS. We've got our normal immigration and tax updates. We've got all the latest breaking news. And get this, we are going to be giving away a free trip to Dallas to visit GME live. How exciting is that? That's a trip that will include a flight and accommodation. All you have to do is just say yes, please. More on that in a moment. If you'd like to win a free trip to Dallas to go to GME live. How exciting is that? But everybody, you know how it works. Please join in the conversation, write in the comments box, tell us who you are, where you are, what's going on in your world. Now, a lot of people will also want their CPE credits, and of course, we offer those. We have CPE credits. You can get them from ERC, Worldwide ERC, if you want your GMS or your CRP credits. You can get them from HRCI, you can get them from SHRM. So if you want those credits, that's all you need to do is just jot down the number there, 2676 676 or 665210 or 24 or whatever it is. It's up there on the screen, and just take it if you want it. Next week, our show is going to be talking about managed budgets and flexible mobility in practice. So a really, really exciting show next week. But what has been going on in the wonderful world of global mobility over the last 7 days? Let's have a quick look about what has been going on in our world over the last 7 days. And then after that, I'm going to be bringing on the wonderful Alex Felstead of GME Live to tell us a little bit about the free draw that we have on. Anyway, let's look at the news. So, Eid Mubarak, everybody's celebrating. Congratulations, everyone who's been promoted, everyone who's moved job, and lots of job opportunities out there. But I'm super excited. We've got Alex Felstead with us. Alex from GME Live. So, Alex, tell us about GME Live and this wonderful prize draw that we have on the show today.
Yes, thank you, Brian, and appreciate you inviting us back onto the show. Yes, so we've got a fantastic event, our flagship Americas event on April the 25th, the GME Live Americas in Dallas. We've got some best-in-class global mobility and HR leaders joining us, and today we're going to be offering the chance for someone to win flights and accommodation to attend GME Live in Dallas on the 25th of April. A couple of caveats: you must be an in-house global mobility or HR professional. You need to be available for the 24th, 25th, and 26th of April due to the travel. You need to comment yes please in the comment section, and you must be on the show at the end for the draw to be able to claim the prize.
Okay, so everybody, it's corporate only, in-house only. If you'd like to get the free trip to Dallas, all you need to do is put yes, please in the comments box, or words equivalent to that, so that Alex can work out that you want to come. And then we will make the draw. We'll bring Alex back at the end of the show, and you have to be in the audience when we make the draw. Okay, so that's it. Thank you so much, Alex. We've got a big show.
Later.
We'll see you later. We're going to move on, and we're going to bring on our immigration update with Julia Onslow Cole. So everybody, you know how it works. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button. Say thank you to Alex Felstead and GME Live for their draw that they're doing. And let's welcome onto the show, Julia Onslow Cole.
Hi, Brian.
Hi, Julia. How good to see you. So I know we've been talking about GME Live in Dallas in a couple of weeks' time, but you've also got a US theme to your show today.
Yeah. The GME event's really great. I'm looking forward to it very much. So I wonder who'd be lucky enough to win that ticket. Be lovely. Yes, so I want to talk about the US election. So it's kind of like part 2 of the US. I did part 1 last week, and it does sort of fit with the theme of crisis management, you know, the elections being quite discombobulating for all organizations, wondering what's going to happen. And I just wanted to say a big thank you to Bo Cooper, who leads our Center for Strategy and Applied Insights. It's a new center that we've set up in Washington. And he spoke to me this week for just to give me his thoughts and the thoughts that they're applying at the Institute. So the election's obviously in November, and obviously too early to say whether Donald Trump or Joe Biden will be president, but it's not just about the presidential race. So it's also very important to look at the race for the House and the Senate, because that will, the outcome of those races will really decide how far a president can implement their plans. So currently the situation is that the Democrats have a very slim majority in the Senate. Very slim, 51 to 49. So it wouldn't take much to swing that to the Republicans. And a lot of commentators think that that's very likely. And then the race for the House of Representatives looks to be very unclear. So regardless of the presidential outcome, a Republican Senate flip would mean that there would be no Democratic sweep if President Biden won a second term, and there would be a mixed government and probably continued gridlock when it comes to pushing through any major legislation. Now, if you listen to economic commentators talk about the global economy, but particularly the US economy, they're very focused on what's going to happen vis-a-vis the House of Representatives and the Senate, and they say that the financial markets will be much less impacted if there's another split and another deadlock. Now, the great advantage you've got in predicting what immigration policy will be like post November 2024 is that obviously we've seen both candidates as presidents before, and they've articulated their views on immigration in executive orders. So we've seen President Biden stated that his belief that immigration feeds the US economy, the culture, the well-being, and he will try to achieve immigration to achieve those goals. So if President Biden continues after November, his current policies are likely to continue. Well, President Trump said if it was a President Trump, he has said in an executive order that he believed immigration was a threat to the well-being of the US, and therefore the government's role was to control that threat. And we know what happened last time, and his aim will be to reduce legal and illegal migration. And there is rather a funny anecdote about this, because when President Trump became president last time around, Steve Bannon went into the White House and he wanted to post on social media that he was actually in the White House. So he stood against a random whiteboard and then posted it on social media. And then if you blow up that post, a lot of times you'll see that he's standing next to a whiteboard with the immigration policy on it. So I've seen a lot of photographs of tiny Steve Bannon with a blown up picture of all the immigration policy. Now, last time round, obviously, President Trump faced this deadlock and inability to pass major legislation. But he still managed to make a lot of changes. So you can make a lot of changes still by executive orders, changes in policy, regulations, and by increasing requests for additional information, so RFEs, which we saw last time. And also you can pull levers on resources. So if you're a government, you could take the resources away from processing of applications, and you could put extra resources in enforcement. So aside from knowing their likely stance on immigration, both men will be experienced. And this time round, Trump will have had a good idea of how he achieved certain objectives last time round. And he's likely to be quicker to get to some of the things than perhaps he was last time. So it's April now. So what should everyone be doing? And these are the sorts of things that Bo Cooper and Fragman are advising clients on, and this is the sorts of things that we're working on with clients. First of all, analyzing your population, looking at your pipeline, who's coming into the US, who do you want to bring into the US? Can you accelerate their hiring? Do you want to renew any visas early? And the other thing to say is that the current administration has made it easier to recruit people with STEM skills. And also there's new, very good guidance on O1 visas. So you could take advantage of those policies now. These are more favorable policies, and you could take advantage of them. And then if the policy changed later, you could argue that there was a reliance interest, that you'd relied on these old policy. So that's just another thing to do. So this is just high level. There are lots and lots of other things that one can do. But I think it's good to be prepared, and it's good to be thinking about this now and mitigate any of the impacts that might affect your flow of talent.
Got it. So the moral of the story is, don't just do nothing, but prepare for the fact that there may be a change of administration in whatever it is, 9 months' time or so next January, but when the new administration comes in, if it comes in.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Preparation is the key. Don't let yourself be caught out by surprise. Julia, as ever, many, many thanks for your update. We're going to now move on to a tax update. Lots of people are doing it. Please write yes, please, if you want to write, if you want to win a free trip to Dallas to GME Live in April the 25th. And we'll be making the draw at the end of the show. And remember, of course, you do have to be actually in the show at the end of the show to claim the prize if you are lucky enough to make the draw. Anyway, we're going to move on now. We're going to bring on Julie Barron and Flavia Fernandez to tell us a little bit about tax in Brazil. So everybody, let's hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button. Let's say thank you to Julia Onslow-Cole and welcome to the stage, Julie Barron and Flavia Fernandez. Good. The numbers are going crazy. We've got 300 people watching us live. So I'm not going to eat into your time. Julie, kick off. What are we going to be talking about?
Today, I have my partner in Brazil, Flavia Fernandez, to give us some updates on some tax changes that are happening in the wonderful country of Brazil, where she has recently invited me to visit, and someday I'm going to do it.
Okay. Thank you so much for inviting me, and you are more than welcome here, Jody, for sure. Thank you for the invitation, and I'd like to share two major changes in the Brazilian legislation that will impact the global mobility environment. The first one refers to one of the employer's payroll obligation related to the FGTS. FGTS is a severance indemnity fund that all employees are entitled to receive. It is, as I said, it is an employer's obligation, and it consists on 8% on top of the total compensation paid credit delivered to all employees in Brazil or abroad with no cap. So what is new on FGTS? The Brazilian government has just launched a new tool to give more transparency to all employees on what are the amounts that is being paid on their behalf on the FGTS bank account. And also there is a change in the deadline to pay it. Before it was on the 7th day of the following month, and now the employer has to meet or to fulfill the obligation by the 20th day of the following month. So this is the new for the FGTS that hugely impacts the global mobility population in Brazil. And also the second news or update that I'd like to share with you, it refers to a new legislation on individual tax that impacts the investment held abroad. I'm not here to say what exactly changed on an individual level, but how it impacts the employer and those who are managing equity plans and LTI programs, because there is a change in the tax rate. Before it would be up to 27.5%. Now it's 15%, so a lower rate. And before the taxation was due on a monthly basis. Now it's on a yearly basis. And these new rules are applicable to those who are receiving dividends or handling transactions, selling shares such as stock option or RSUs that should be subject to a new this new rule. So for those who are managing this type of plans or program, they should take into consideration the new rules whenever calculating the sell-to-cover transaction or the hypothetical tax and so on. So that's it for today, and I'm free for any question.
Okay, so thank you so much for that, Flavia. So big changes happening in Brazil. We're now going to be talking about mobility management in a world in perma-crisis. And I'm super excited that we have backstage joining us Ricus Groenewald and Nidia Knight from International SOS. So everybody, we're going to say goodbye to Julie and to Flavia and welcome to Ricus and Nidia. So please, everybody, hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's talk about mobility management in a world in perma-crisis. Hey Nidia, hey Ricus, how are you? How are you both?
Hi Brian.
Yes. Hi Brian, good to see you.
Hi. So, and everybody, it's up there at the bottom of the screen. But if you want to win a free trip to Dallas, do remember to say yes, please, if you want to win that trip, and we'll be making the draw at the end of the show. But let's start off. Ricus, I'll start with you. Nidia, I know you've been on the show before, but I'll start with Ricus. tell us a little bit about International SOS and your role in the company.
Thanks, Brian, and thank you for the opportunity to be on the show today. As you said, my name is Ricus Groenewald. I'm the Director of Operations worldwide for International SOS.
Wow,
we're a global organization focusing on supporting organizations, helping them to support their workforce on a global basis. Very diverse in terms of the different industries we are supporting, and it's both on the international assignees, their business travelers, as well as their domestic workforce. So on a global basis, how do we do it? Through our 26 assistance centers globally, to give us that opportunity of being close to our clients where they operate, from a local knowledge and expertise, staffed by operations, medical and security professionals. So on the one side, helping organizations to prepare as they look after their workforce, but also to be in a state of readiness to support organizations, when they run into trouble and they need some help.
And give me an idea of scope. I mean, how many events you deal with, a week or a month or a year? And give us an idea of scope here.
Brian, if we just talk about the normal day-to-day of often referred to as the business as usual, thousands of cases, most of the time providing advice and information, helping travelers to understand what's the necessary vaccinations you need when you go abroad, what do you do if you lose your passport, and to the extreme of you caught up in a terrorist attack, how do you respond, who do you contact? And then from an organization perspective, is helping organizations to have the right policies and procedures to know how to respond. So thousands of cases, just basic assistance, advice and information, but then of course that small percentage, which is really the complex cases.
Okay, and as we go through the show, out in the audience, if you've got questions for Ricus or Nidia, do ask them. Nidia, now obviously International SOS itself has got many employees, and almost by definition, you're sending employees into difficult locations, because if it wasn't difficult, I suppose you wouldn't be needed there. But tell us a bit about, because you're the internal head of mobility, so tell us a bit about your role in your program.
So Nidia Knight, and I'm the head of international HR at International SOS. We do support all our mobile workforce, so all our medics, so doctors, nurses, paramedics, security professionals who are deployed around the world to our clients, to our own sites, to our own clinics. About a large population that just goes whenever it's needed, and it has to be really ready on a very short notice.
Okay, so let's move on. We called the show "The World in Perma-Crisis," but Ricus, what is Perma-Crisis? Tell us a bit about the concept.
Brian, if we really look back at 2023, and we look at the number of events that occurred, it's quite significant if you firstly look at the frequency of events. We actively have two wars currently. We've got, the Ukraine, Russia. We've got Israel and Hamas. So two quite significant ongoing conflict situations. And then at the same time, what we're seeing is global warming and the impact that has on the world. And, just the number of natural disasters. Last year we saw, the wildfires in Greece, a lot more extensive than any other year. We had the wildfires in Hawaii, but also, we've got a number of earthquakes. Turkey, comes to mind. And then, things like the hurricane in Mexico. What's some observations is just the frequency is increasing, and then the overlapping. And, organizations are really struggling because, as a community, we can easily be faced with more than one event impacting us at the same time.
Okay, and I think we've got a slide that shows some of this. Maybe we can just put this slide up of the. And here we go. So
yeah.
we're seeing. Tell us a bit about this, Ricus.
Yes, basically just what we covered off. This is just a nice visual to really appreciate the reality of what we faced in 2023. And already if we start looking forward to 2024, I think Susie in the chat earlier mentioned, the number of countries. I think it's 40 to 50% of the world's going into elections. We live in a time of uncertainty. Global warming is real. We already saw just this 2024, the uprise in the situation in Haiti, which also resulted in, people having to be evacuated. We just recently had, the earthquake in Taiwan. So everything points to 2024 potentially could have the same effect as 2023.
Okay, so I got. And what's the impact then on companies, Nidia? We'll take that slide off now. So talk us about how companies are reacting to this perma-crisis world.
So Brian, from as an international mobility, we really have to be ready. For example, we have our own employees, mobility assignees in, for example, Taiwan. So just last week with the earthquake, right? So while you hear it on the news, the first thing we think about is who do we have there? How do we contact them? Are they okay, right? So having the contact details, knowing where your employees are is really critical, especially if you have a large mobility program. At International SOS, we deploy medics to over 45 countries. So our mobility partners have to be ready, have to be very much aware where their employees are, who they are, and be able to connect with them and then report centrally. So it is critical to be really ready in days like in the world that we live today, really.
Okay, I'm being told that some people are having problems posting messages on LinkedIn. I think that problem is now okay. So if you've got questions you do want to ask Nidia or Ricus, then please do carry on posting on LinkedIn. I think whatever was the LinkedIn problem is sorted now. And what we're going to try and do as we go through is we're going to try and draw out lessons and takeaways for companies, if you like, best practice of what can be done. But let's just start off. I'll go back to you, Ricus, and let's just talk about, I think, a subject which is everybody's worst nightmare in mobility, which is managing an evacuation. So something awful has happened, be it instability or natural disaster or whatever might be the reason. Tell us a bit about how you go about managing an evacuation.
Yes, I think if we talk about evacuation, I think by definition it's complexity. Doesn't matter if it's a single individual that sustain a traumatic event, involved in a road traffic accident, potentially in a location where healthcare is limited and has to be evacuated to a center for upgrading medical care, or you talk about a security evacuation, as we just recently had in Haiti, where we talk about having to deploy an air asset to pick up a number of people and take them to a point of safety. So evacuations, by definition, I say it's complexity, and that's why as organizations, you really need to focus on how do you build the right support structure to ensure that in the event that you need to evacuate somebody, you have the right partner to work with. And in particular, simple complexity is around travel documents, making sure people have got valid passports to be able to leave a particular country, and then the importance of finding a country where you can safely be evacuated to, where, again, your travel documents won't create a problem. So we still, even in evacuations, we still have the general challenge of bureaucracy in terms of moving people from one country to the next. And we have to work within those limitations and parameters and ensure that we find a solution. And I think that's the key thing, which may be difficult in some locations, but in some cases, again, through our experience and the frequency in which we do evacuations, it does give us the opportunity to learn from previous cases to ensure that we are able to support any future evacuations.
And Nidia, what sort of policies and procedures should companies be putting in place?
So, within the organizations, and this is where you really have to be prepared, you have to be proactive, right? So these events happen without any notice, and you really have to, whenever you're not responding to a crisis, you really need to be preparing, having a policy and a procedure in place, and work with your assistance program provider that you have in place. So for us, having a policy that really explains clearly who is the roles and responsibilities, what is the limits of authority, who do you contact, what is the process that you'll follow, correct? But just simple things like Ricus was mentioning about passports and understanding, where people are coming from, because when you do have to move people out of a location, where do you move them to? They will need to have, most likely will need to have a visa for your closest center or your closest major city that you're moving them to. So to actually have a map out of the employees that you have in a particular country, what are their nationalities and where would you move them to? It is critical. So in terms of having a procedure in place, really look at roles and responsibilities, who do you contact, who is authorized to authorize the cost of the service, right? So imagine that you receive a phone call of someone who's had a road traffic accident, and they asking you, where should we take this person to, which hospital, are we covered now for, a private hospital? And then you contact your assistance center and they'll be asking you exactly the same question. You need to understand the speed, right? You need to understand who to contact and who's going to be able to have that authority to make this decision fast, so that you can work with your assistance team in place.
And I mean, one question actually is, a lot of people have got, if you like, evacuation policies, but also I'm guessing in a good policy, it's also worth having a policy that actually flies people in as well. What I'm thinking about is a situation where, for example, an assignee has an accident. One policy is about repatriating the assignee, but you may also want to fly in loved ones to look after the person. So you need to look at this in the round.
So usually you will have, your global insurance program, your travel, either the business travel or your international mobility assignee, you will have a good insurance plan in place. In that insurance plan, then this is where it usually be covered. What is the limits, who can come into the country, how long they can stay, where do they stay, so that when you do have to make a decision, you have a reference document that you can go to be able to implement.
Okay, and a couple of questions come in. I'll just take one from Michelle, and she said this: does International SOS have an overreaching policy, insurance policy, they can offer with premiums, and are the actual costs then paid at the time of the event? So do you offer an insurance policy yourselves?
Yes, we have our own insurance policy for our own employees, so both for mobility employees, but also for business travelers. They're fully covered, and this insurance policy, it's well defined and it's mentioned in the assignee handbook, but our business traveler handbook as well. As part of this, the assistance center, of course, International SOS, we use our own assistance centers. The assistance center, when they onboard a new client, so the insurance, the definitions and the limits of the insurance is something that we discuss with the team at the assistance center, and they would know exactly what are the limits, who's the contact person, and what our employees are entitled to. So in that respect, if something happens and there is an accident in one of the countries, the country team, most probably a friend will get to know that this person had an accident. They will call the company. The company then calls the assistance center. The assistance center identifies that is International SOS, where this employee is based. And they will then will know who to contact within International SOS to give the authorization. right? So all this is really well defined. Yeah.
Okay. So let me move on the conversation, ask another question. And Ricus, I'll start with you, if I may. I mean, when you've got a workforce that is in a high-risk location, so we haven't had the disaster happen yet, but we know that something may happen because it's a dangerous location. How do you support a workforce in that sort of high-risk environment?
I think to start with is organizations, when they elect to deploy staff to a high-risk location, is really to understand the risk, understand what's the potential risk, both from a just genetically, in terms of from a cultural perspective, but also from medical and security perspective, just to ensure that those that are deployed, have the right profile and is able to function in that type of environment, which, as we can imagine, is often very challenging. So what we try to do is provide the right level of advice and information to help organizations prepare to identify the risk. And our role is as an enabler is not necessarily to discourage anybody from deploying staff to a high-risk location, but more to understand the risk and then ensure that they are appropriately prepared. So, for instance, if you are sending somebody to a high or an extreme risk location, is make sure they've done the necessary training to be able to work in a hostile environment. Look at what is the support you put in place in terms of transportation. So in many of these locations, you probably won't be able to drive yourself. So you need to think about the type of secure transportation. Where do you put up people in their accommodation? And then just generally, and Nidia can talk a lot around the, in terms of on the health side, send healthy people. Why? Because generally in high or extreme risk location, in general, the infrastructure is poor. So therefore, if you travel with a chronic medical condition, on the one side, please continue, but make sure you take, the medication with you. But understand, depending on where you're going, that medication is in fact legal. So again, helping organizations to think through that type of thing, but then ensuring that you send healthy people. And there are ways, and Nidia can comment on how to ensure that you go through the right process to check before you send somebody to those locations.
How do you do that without running the risk of discrimination, of making sure that you're only sending healthy people to a high-risk location?
I mean, Brian, if I just jump in, I mean, from an international SOS point of view, when we do send our employees, they are actually medical professionals, right? So, and a lot of the times, or most of the times, they are the only one in the site location looking after, hundreds of people. So imagine one of our doctors would be on a mine, and if something were to happen to our doctor, first, there's no one else to support, in that case, so it will be a real problem. But also, the mine or the client will have to shut down services until we have someone else on site to support. So sending someone that that is healthy for that particular location is crucial. But it's also part of our duty of care, right? We do have to make sure that we know who, the health condition, and physical and psychological as well, right? To go to that site. And when we do have employees that need to might not have might not be at the right time for that, be the right person for that location, we then work with that employee to improve their health situation, or we move them to a site where he is going to be safe, right? Because that is the main concern, is that we need to ensure that the safety of our own employees. Because if you are, for example, in Papua New Guinea and you need a root canal, right? That means a flight to Australia or a flight to Singapore, right? You can't just do it in country, and you can't really just, go a week when you need a root canal. So really, really basic things that sometimes we don't think about that will have a great impact when you're actually on a site like this, a high-risk site. So it is critical.
let me move the conversation on because we're getting loads and loads of questions coming in. I'll just take one here from Sandra Clary. She asks, can your services be engaged ad hoc, or does it require an ongoing retainer? So just a quick answer to that, maybe Ricus.
Of course, we're in the business of helping people. So of course, if somebody needs assistance, we're there to help. But in fact, the preference is that you are subscribed to our services, because then we can put in place the appropriate operating procedures, and collectively, we provide holistic support to you as an organization and for your workforce. Where on an ad hoc basis, it's a moment in time, and it's not always ideal to try and figure out how the two organizations need to work together or partner to support the employee in need of assistance. So therefore, the subscription really ensure that upfront we put the right processes in place, so that we know about roles and responsibilities between our organizations when we start supporting your workforce.
And let me move on again. Another question that came in was about tracking. And tell us, Nidia, about how companies could or should track people. I actually did an April Fool on this. Some of you may say about implanting a chip in people. But that aside, taking Daniel's point, what support can International SOS offer a company to keep tabs on the physical location of personnel in a high-risk location?
I'll let Ricus answer that one.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's a number of ways you can do it. The one side is what we'll call active monitoring. So you've got a device that GPS device that track your movement. That can be monitored. It can be geo-fenced. So if you leave a certain area, so for instance, while you're in the compound, it's safe. But if you move out of the compound, that triggers a notification that you've moved location, and that will then trigger a process. So a number of ways, also through an active monitoring. If somebody's just on let's say a business trip to a high-risk location, is through a daily check-in call to confirm they're in the right location and they are safe. However, if there's no contact, again, that trigger another process for us to escalate within our client's organization.
Okay.
But Brian, just on a day-to-day work and a day-to-day with the business travelers and international mobility employees, right? It's to have, we, for example, have a very strong program with our travel partners. So we have a travel partner that has all the procedures in place. We know exactly where our employees are, which hotel they are staying. So all our hotels are vetted ahead of time, right? And if something were to happen in the country, we would then connect, work with our travel partner to understand who is in country and which hotels they are staying at. But also through the assistance center, our employees receive messages, alerts, if something has happened in the country with indication, and then instant messaging as well on, what to do, how to go about it, who to contact, and they can send messages directly both ways. So having that travel a partner in place, it's, I think, one of the most critical preventions you can have, really, to ensure that at least you really know where the people are.
Okay, so Ricus, tell us about natural disasters, because obviously if there's a natural disaster, the whole area is chaotic at best, and it's going to be very hard to even to get in to help and to get people out. So tell us, maybe give us some examples about how you've managed situations in areas where there's been a large natural disaster.
Yes, and as we said earlier, it's something that's occurring on a more frequent basis. I think if we refer to a few examples, for instance, the floods in Chennai in India, again, there's a good example, and we may touch on it later, but just to talk about post-pandemic, organizations has reverted to employing more and more domestic workforce. So you've got a large number of people potentially in an affected area. So a common request is to help to sustain and to maintain, and that could be what we would call supply drops. So procuring fresh water, dry food, and have that distributed to those individuals that potentially affected. Very complicated, as you also rightly said, Brian. It's sometimes difficult to access, those particular locations. But then you have the scenario of the hurricanes in Acapulco in Mexico last year, totally unexpected. Again, in a location where we were faced with a total blackout in communication, which brings a very different challenge to us. But again, we were able to send a provider down to Acapulco to be able to do welfare checks, making sure that clients that had employees in that location, make sure they are safe, and then put the necessary transport solution, buses in place to move people to a point of safety. Similarly, a more extreme event was probably the earthquake in Turkey, which was extended period of time, highly complicated. Just again, moving people was difficult. However, that was probably the most common request, is moving people out of harm's way to safety. And at the same time, those individuals that were not able to move, is to find ways to bring, the necessary emergency supplies to help them maintain up to a point that they can either move or the situation improve.
And presumably every time something like this happens, there are lessons that are learned, because nothing is ever, sadly, perfect. So Nidia, tell us a little bit about post-event debriefing and lessons learned and experiences. Tell us a bit about what companies should be doing in that regard after an event.
After an event is really looking at bringing people together, speaking to, bringing your service partners together as well, and actually have a full review of what happened, how did it happen, how did the service go, right? What were the gaps that you identified? Because as much as you can be very well prepared, as all the situations are always different. Even the emotional state of the family members, or how difficult it was to contact the family member, anything can happen. So in that respect, it's bringing everyone together, looking at the gaps and updating your procedures. This is really the best time to do that while it's still fresh in your mind. Okay,
and to go the other way, and I know Jacqueline's made a comment about, a dangerous location can be anywhere. And she makes the point there that Amsterdam was a dangerous location because the kids have got access to alcohol and drugs, and it's difficult to monitor. But yeah, we never know when disaster is going to strike or where it's going to strike. So it's always going to be about preparation. So maybe we can just spend a few minutes talking about best practice. And maybe I'll start off with you, Nidia, and then bring Ricus into the conversation. What does best practice look like when we're talking about contingency planning for some form of disaster, political or natural?
Well, having, as we said earlier, having an assistant, if you have a large program and you have a large number of employees, then definitely have an assistant partner in place to work with you, help you to put those policies and procedures together and to test them as well. And having then a travel partner in place as well, so that you know where everyone is at any time. Then you go into the most simple things, such as having employee contact information updated on a frequent basis. I know in some countries you can't go and ask for, potentially even email address, not email addresses, but to have home addresses and so on. So in those locations, what we do, we ask the employees to update it themselves if they wish to do so. And we send the message out every quarter to employees to update their information. Then having your teams, so usually if you have a program, you have a procedure, you have a policy at the global level, how do you ensure that this is well understood at regional level? How do you communicate this down and have all your local teams understanding the procedure, and mainly how to deal with international mobility employees? Because if there is a natural disaster in a country like Taiwan or Turkey, local HR is most likely going to, they will be really busy looking at their large population, because they will have 99% of the employees will be the local population. So the mobility team really that usually will be outside the country, has to be ready to be able to support without even having access or being in the country, right? And this is where practice really is critical. So having
that's a really great point. You said practice, and I do wonder, how often do companies do, I'll be interested in the audience view, how often do you do a crisis rehearsal or preparation? I mean, how often should companies do crisis rehearsals, Ricus?
Yeah, I think firstly I would say make sure it's clear who are the decision makers, because in these crisis events, often we need to make very quick decisions, and the reality is they very seldom happens on between 9 and 5 Monday to Friday. So it's really to understand what's your structure and then your role and responsibilities within your crisis team, and then it's to really use the opportunity to practice your scenarios. Again, you can't do that enough, especially we are now faced with very diverse type of events. And by the way, it's not always just about the major crisis event. We are talking here about a very simple, somebody potentially falling ill in a location and needs help, or somebody is in a situation where they need security intervention. Again, you need to practice that. So, and it ties back into the lessons learned. The more we reflect on how we've dealt with something, because in the next event or the next crisis, you're going to refer back to what you've learned from the previous, and that's what makes us good. It makes us quick, and it makes us make the right decisions at the right time. But overall, we are dealing with perma-crisis. So the other big elephant in the room is fatigue management. It's really important to think about, do you have the right alternates in your crisis team? Many of the colleagues that's participating today and listening, will be familiar with, you get tired, you can't carry on for weeks and months on end. So you need to make sure your alternates are identified and make sure they are part of your lessons learned, make sure they are part of those that practice, you're going through your crisis management policies and procedures, and ensure that, everybody has the ability to take a step back at some point in time, dealing with the crisis event.
I just want to come in on one point, talking about crisis, our own little minor crisis here. Some people are saying that they're having problems posting to LinkedIn. We're getting lots of comments. But if you can't post yes, please, and you do want to be in the draw, then just send an email directly to Tally-Goran, that's tally.goran@benevo.com, and we'll try and get it that way. But I know some of you are managing to message on LinkedIn, and some, for some reason, are not being able to comment. So if you want to be in the draw, which we'll be doing in about 3 or 4 minutes' time, and then do send a quick email if your comment hasn't appeared on screen and you want it to. But just to start finishing up on this subject, Nidia and Ricus, maybe you could just give us a quick summary as what would you say would be the key takeaways that people should take from today's show when they think about their own crisis management preparation. So maybe give us 5 or 6 key takeaways.
So be proactive. Always be a step ahead. Look at what policies and procedures you have in place today. Look when they were last updated, right? Review that. Sit with your crisis management team. If you don't have one, set one up. And then maybe practice a scenario. Write up a scenario, one that happened last year somewhere in the world. Bring those people to the table and give them the scenario and go around the table to ask them, what would you do in this case? So, mobility would be go and run a report to understand who is in the country, contact with local HR, with the security team. Have a very well-defined roles and responsibilities, like Ricus mentioned. If you don't know who to contact, if you don't know who's the person responsible for making decisions, especially financial decisions, because at that time it's really about booking tickets or hospitals and so on, then you're just going to delay, right? Understand so contact details, next of kin, who's going to be responsible for speaking to the employees, right? So ideally, you have an assistance program in place where the team there are going to be looking after your employees on the ground so that you can really focus on keeping the family members updated and in contact, right? And then, like Ricus mentioned as well, the fatigue management. We at International SOS have ensured that all our employees around the world are covered under a EAP program, so Employee Assistance Program, to look after themselves and to have the support after event or whenever they need it.
Okay, so lots of really important takeaways there, and I think the key is, I suppose, is to have procedures in place. And every company should be looking at those quite regularly. I think we were talking earlier, you said maybe you should have a quarterly review as to, what is going on in the world and what your preparations are, and just always assume that something awful, sadly, is going to happen. We're now going to move on to our wonderful prize draw. So Nidia and Ricus, and we're going to move you backstage for a moment, and we're going to bring Alex onto the stage. So thank you both. I'm just going to move them backstage and move Nidia backstage, and we're going to bring Alex onto stage. So Alex, hi. We've had lots of people saying yes, please, and I know you've got something that's going to pass for a hat.
Yes, no, great show, Brian. But yes, no hat this time, but we've got I know it looks like a bin, but
it does look incredibly like a bin. Absolutely,
it is actually. It's a proper drawing device. So
okay, no product placement there, but I gather it's from a well-known Swedish retailer.
Correct. Yes.
So we're going to do the draw now. If your name is drawn out, as we said, you actually have to be in the audience. So if your name is drawn out, then please do type something like wow or thank you or something so that we know you're there. And I'm hoping that LinkedIn is working, so your comments there. Okay, Alex, drum roll. Let's go for it. Who's going to win the trip to Dallas?
I'll have a mix up first. Okay, we have got Maria Pasarova from Motive.
Okay, Maria. Is Maria in the audience? Do we have Maria out in the audience? Okay, we'll give that a minute. I'm not seeing any comments coming in from Maria. Do we have Maria out there? Right, we'll give you a minute or so. Otherwise, we're going to have to do another draw. Oh, no, Maria's there.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah, Maria is there. So congratulations to Maria. You have won a free ticket, a free flight. I'm not sure where in the world you're coming from, but it's from anywhere. So Maria, where are you flying from? Let's find out where she's coming from. And Alex will be in touch to organize that flight for you. So Maria will be out in Dallas next 2 weeks time. So meanwhile, let me bring our other guests on as our show, and I'm going to bring Ricus and Nidia back. I'm going to bring Julia and Julie and Flavia back, and of course our wonderful producer Tally. Thank you to everybody. Thank you to Julie and to Flavia for that wonderful tax update. Thank you to Julia for your wonderful immigration update, to Tally for all your work behind the scenes, making the show run as smoothly, to Alex for the draw, and to Ricus and Nidia for all their insights. We are now out of time. I am Brian Friedman. I've been your host on The View from the Top, and we are back this time next week when we're going to be talking about managed policies. So we've got a really, really exciting show next week. Take care, everybody, and have a great, great week. Take care and goodbye.